In this video, we will learn how to use data in Snap, and we will learn how to import the data into Snap from the outside, and also how to use that data and how to split it up and actually do something interesting with the data. In your lab, you will be working with weather data, and for this example, I have chosen a bunch of publicly available data from the census, and it was based on this cool visualization that I want to show you. This is a really neat visualization that the census has put together. They have a lot of publicly available data, and I just picked this one because I like the visualization and it was some data that we could play with in Snap pretty quickly. What this visualization is it's showing you the number of males of each age, so each bar is an age, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the number of females. So the females are orange, the males are blue. And then it shows you from 1900 to 2000. And it tells you a couple of notes up here that from 1900 to 1939, if you were 75 or older, they aggregated you. 1940, they started at 85, and then after 1980, they moved up to 100. So that's why there's a little bit of a weird jump up there. What's really cool about this, you can see how people have been born, how the numbers have gone down, and then all of a sudden you see the baby boom quite dramatically. And then you can see the children of the baby boomers. I'll just play that one more time just for fun. And we'll pause it when we get to the baby boom. Okay, right there, there's a downward trend in the number of babies that are being born. And then right here, we're sitting at 1944, so the war ended in 1945. And you can see the number of babies is going to increase dramatically. See? There's the baby boom. I thought that was pretty cool. And then you get up here, so that the number of baby boomers are old enough to start having children, the numbers go down and then they start going back up again. Right there. Another thing you can see out of this visualization is that the women live longer than the men. There are far more bars of women up here in the older ages than there are men. So we're going to use this data. You can go to the same URL and you can download the data for yourself. I'm going to use it for the example. Okay, so in order to import data, the first thing we need to do is make a variable. I'm going to call it data. I'm going to make it global. We're just going to have one sprite. It doesn't really matter for right now. And call it data. So go over to the window where you can see the word data and right-click on it. And you can see that it shows you a couple of different choices. We're not going to play with any of those. We're going to go to the very bottom and we're going to say import. And then you can give it the data. It brings me right up to the census data. And I had already saved it as a CSV file. So I'm going to import the CSV file. CSV stands for comma-separated values. And it just imports it directly. And what you can see is all of the data is put into one variable. So I've got columns. I've got the year, the age that they are, the numbers for both genders, the numbers for males, and the numbers for females. Now I'm not going to recreate that visualization. I am actually just going to show you how to load in data and how to actually get from one big variable that has everything in it, essentially in one giant string, how to turn that into actual numbers. If we wanted to recreate the visualization, that would actually be fairly difficult because we don't have the ability to draw bar graphs. We could do it with lines. But you would want to hide this variable, and so one other note is that you can hide variables. For right now, since I'm not going to do a visualization, I'm just going to leave it alone. So now that we have the data loaded in, we need to figure out what we want to do with it. So in order to figure out what we want to do with it, we need to have a goal. And the goal that I want to do for this is I want to just compute some statistics and some number crunching on this data. In your lab, you're actually going to load in data and actually do graphs on them. So before we can actually process this data, we need to talk about one other thing that we haven't talked about yet, and that is a list. Consider going grocery shopping. You want to go grocery shopping, you write down the list of items that you want to buy. Milk, eggs, cookies, chips. It's an unordered list. In Snap, they're actually going to be in order. So if you imagine writing down your grocery list in the order in which you would buy them. So if the dairy aisle is first, you'd write cheese, then milk. Then perhaps you get your bread at the end because it's at the end of the store. That will be an ordered list, and all the lists in Snap will be ordered. So the reason we need lists is what we're going to do is we're going to read in this data and we're going to break it. We're going to break up the data first by the lines and then second by the commas. And when we do that breaking, it's going to put it into a list. Lists are pretty neat because you can access any item in the list either by the specific number or just by looking at the beginning or the end of the list. You can add things to the list. You can delete things from the list. It's pretty neat. So we're going to show you how to use them while we're processing this data. So let's make a really, really simple program. I'm going to create another variable. We'll just call it the line. And I'm going to make the line So I'm going to set the variable line to splitting it, and I need to split the data. And it gives you a couple of choices, and you can also type in things. But since I just want line, I'm just going to say line. And for right now, just so you can see what it does, we're going to have it say the line. I'm going to run that. Of course, you can't see it. Oh, well, of course we did something wrong. So when I run that, you only get to see the last, you only see one line. What we actually need to do is loop through that as a list. And we need to import tools so that we can do that. So we're going to load the official library of powerful blocks, as it says. Okay, and now this really improves our handling of lists. So we set this, I'm actually going to rename this to lines, because what it is actually a list of each line individually. And then I'm going to call this the line instead of item. And I'm going to loop through each item in those lines and say them. There you go. And now you can see the top line and the next line, and we won't let that keep running. You can see that we broke it into lines. So let's talk about what we really need to do in order to process it. I said our goal was to do some statistics. Let's choose our statistic of being able to count how many men and women are of the age of 0 to 18, any minors, basically, in each year. So I'm going to create a couple of variables. I need to know what year I'm processing. And I need a current total of the number of males and of the number of females in that year. And then I'm going to make a couple of global variables. We'll call them minor males and minor females. I'm going to take out the say, because we don't actually care about the say. And we're going to need to initialize a bunch of these. So if you're going to use a list, like minor males, it's going to be a list of the number of minor males each year. You need to initialize it as a list, which requires you bringing in this little list thing. And then if you want to make it an empty list, just click the little arrow, and that sets it to a brand new list. Do the same thing for the females. Okay? And we also need to, before we start into the loop, set the current year to something. We know what the first year is. It's 1900, so we'll just set it to 1900. And we need to make sure that our totals are set to 0. Okay, so you can see that we have things over here, and if I was to click on this, you will see that it will change minor males and minor females to actually be lists, and I'm going to move them over just so you can see them. And we'll stop it, because we don't need to let it just sit there and do nothing. So now what we need to do is actually process each year. So we already have a line, but it's just one giant line, and now we need to work on splitting it again. So I'm going to make a new set of script variables. Call it line split. And I'm going to set that line split to splitting the line itself. And this time, you'll note that comma is not a choice, but I can just type it in. Okay? And so now we need to look at our data. The first thing is the year, then we have the age, then we want to look at our totals. So if these are indexed, this is the first column, 1 is year, the second column, 2 is age, 3 we're going to skip, and then we need 4 and 5. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look and see if we're still looking at the year that we were last looking at. Actually, we're going to use an if-else. We're going to say if but of course we haven't set a year variable, so we need to do that. And we need to get the year. So let's get the year out of the data. set the year, and then we haven't talked about this for lists before, but the way we're going to do that is we're going to set it by getting the item out of the list. So item, and then you can tell it whichever one you want. You can type in any number, or you can just do first, last, or any. I want the first one, and then I need to tell it which list it is. So I'm getting the item out of line split, which is the thing where we split it by the commas. And now we're going to be able to do the operator and say, well, does the year equal the current year? And so if you're still in the current year, remember there were a bunch of years, then you can actually look and check your ages. So we're going to make another variable, age. We need to set age. And this is where it comes in that we can type in any number, so we want it to be the second number. If you want to verify that, you go over here and look. Column 1 is year, column 2 is age. And then we're going to check that again, because remember I was only counting on minors. And so now that we have age set, we're just going to check and say, is the age less than 18? And if it is, then we need to get the values of how many males and females there are of that age. I'll make 2 more variables. Male count and female count. And I'll get their values. Male count to, now I can do this all in one line without those variables, but it just gets uglier. That's why I'm using an extra variable just to demonstrate it. I said that the male count was number 4, which we can verify by going over here again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll do the same thing for the females. Set the female count. Item 5, and then I need to actually tell it what it's coming from for both of those. Okay? And now that we have them, we need to change the counts that we're doing up above, the male total and the female total. I have 2 change statements. Change our male total, and we're going to change it by the male count, so instead of by 1. We're going to change our female total by female count. So this should work. And if I just run it as it is, it will total up the number of men and women that have ever been under the age of 18 from 1900 onward. But that isn't quite what we wanted. So what we need to do is look at the else part of this. Not the else of if you're less than 18, but the else of if the year is not the current year. So what happens is if it's not the current year, then what we need to do is we need to manipulate our list, and we're going to use the add, which we have not done before. And what we're going to add is we're going to add the male total to the minor male list and do the exact same thing for the females. Add the female total to the female list, and then reset everything. So we're going to set the male total back to 0, the female total back to 0, and set the current year to this new year. All right, we're going to run that. What you should see as it runs is it's adding in the totals. Now there are a couple of bugs, and we're going to go fix those bugs, but I wanted you to see as it ran. And we'll just stop it, because we can see clearly that there are a couple of bugs. For one thing, there shouldn't be zeros at the front. The first 0 is caused by the fact that we actually ask it to do, we read in year, age, both male, female, and then we compare those to something that's numerical called the year, and we set the year to 1900. So that doesn't work very well at all. What we need to do is actually just drop that first line. And so what we're going to do is up here right after we do that, we're going to delete the first item, of lines. And that takes care of one of the zeros. Okay, so this still has one problem. It got rid of one of the zeros, but it didn't get rid of the other. And I think the other is related to the fact that we have a bug down here. The bug is, we ask it if the year is the current year, do we do the right thing? But if it's not the current year, we go ahead and set the male total to 0, which means we're going to actually miss the first line, which we don't want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the grabbing of what the male and female counts are outside the if statement. So just drag them up there. I'll put the change part of that inside the if, but everything else we'll put outside. And then down here, we can actually set this, instead of setting it to 0, whoa, drag into the wrong spot, sometimes it does strange things. Instead of setting it to 0, we're going to set them to the counts that we've already loaded in. And that should take care of the remaining part of the problem. So let's run it real quick. Oh, when I drag that one, it dragged it into a funny spot. We'll just put all that back in the for loop and run again. There we go. We still have a strange 0 there. We did fix that bug. Let's see if we can figure out that strange 0 real quick. I'm going to go into looks, and I'm actually going to say some of our variables so that I know where I am. I'm going to say the line split when I'm running there. So let's run that and see what happens. And you can see that it's showing us that first line, and then it's still inserting a 0. Well, that's a bit of a problem. So we'll add in one more quick debugging statement. This is important skills for you all to learn. Okay, it says it's seeing 1900, and then it's seeing that first line. It's seeing 1900 again. Ah, it's seeing 1990. So we run that, and we see there's something really strange there. Did you see what year it said? It said 1990, and I typed in 1900, and that's because the visualization was from 1900, but actually the data that I downloaded is actually only from 1990 on. So if we run that, we should actually have taken care of our problem. Except for we have drastically slowed things down by saying things for 2 seconds. So let's quick get rid of that say. And we're going to get rid of the other say as well. Okay, now run. There we go. And you have the correct number of male and females for each one of the years. And just so that you can verify that that's correct, we'll stop it and we'll add in one more quick thing. And that is that we will iterate through the list. So we'll look at the end of the list and we'll just see how many more males or females are born in each year. So from 1 to the length of our list, and the list that we'll look at is the male list, they should be the exact same length. We're going to say out loud males minus females to tell whether or not, if it'll be a negative number if there are more females, and it'll be a positive number if there are more males, equals, get an operator in there, whoa, get an operator in there, and we'll just grab the ith item out of the male list and subtract the ith item out of the female list. Okay, and let's run that. Just to take a second. First it has to build up the list. Actually, let's do one more quick thing so that you can see what the sprite's actually saying. I'm going to hide the variable data. Now let's run that again. There you go. There we go. It got to 10, and now it's telling you how many more males or females there are. And you'll notice that the number is positive, so that's interesting. There's actually more male babies born every year than there are females. And that's just a quick example. That was a pretty involved example of how to use data in your labs, and you can use that data to actually learn something, and we used an example of real-world data. So I want you to go off and use the data in your weather lab and have fun learning about weather.